you never are fully fledged, if you like, as a leader. It's a daily learning experience.
Yeah. We're all a work in progress.
Yeah. So, some stuff you get right and some stuff you get wrong. But I think the biggest thing is taking time out to kind of look back and reflect and draw out the learning and then endeavour to apply that learning. And I do think, it's an easy topic to talk about, but it's a quite hard discipline to embed for yourself and for your organisation.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Sharon Sutton.
Welcome to another episode of Island Influencers. I'm your host, Sharon Sutton, and this week's Island Influencer is John Knight, the CEO of Hospice, Isle of Man. He shares his life from his early days and university days to his time living on the island, his departure, and then his eventual return to lead one of the most essential services on the island. John's path has been anything but conventional. Moving 6 times before age 16, he developed a fearless approach to new environments and challenges. We delve into John's insights on leadership, development, career progression, and the importance of organizational values in the non-profit sector. He outlines his vision for hospice services and discusses the financial aspects of running a hospice, emphasizing the efficiency and impact of donations. We also touch on the broader challenges facing charities today, including sustainable models, income diversification, and the need for collaboration. John's insights into these areas are invaluable for anyone interested in the voluntary sector, or running a business for that matter. John's professional achievements are impressive, but his personal stories, achievements and values makes him an expert island influencer. His emphasis on relationships and experiences over material possessions and his joy in travel and outdoor activities add a personal touch to his professional narrative. Here's my conversation with John Knight in episode 115 of Island Influencers. Welcome to this week's edition of Island Influencers, and humble pie is mine from the beginning to eat, and apologise to John unreservedly because the last time we tried this, my recording machine broke down. But since we've had it fixed, and he's been very kind to come and give us take 2, and so without further ado, John Knight, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
When we spoke last time, it was sort of towards the end of March, and since then, you've great kudos to you. You've I'm slightly in awe that you've done the Fred Whitten cycling challenge as part of your CEO Challenge 2024, I think, and you did a really good time. And tell us all about it.
It's kind of you to say a really good time. I mean, 9 hours 36 minutes riding, and then 9:51 on the whole route. I suppose I've always felt that if you're the chief exec of an organisation and that involves fundraising, you should go and do something yourself rather than having others go and do it for you. So over the years, I've done lots of different events. Actually, now, when I look back, there's been a big predominance of cycling, so Land's End, John O'Groats, and last year we did Way of the Roses with a group of lovely people and raised quite a lot of money for Hospice. And this year I got a guaranteed entry into this sportive called Fred Whitten Challenge in the Lake District, and I thought, common sense would be do that as your chief exec's challenge, which I have to say is a title I'm not totally fond of, but anyway, that's what I chose to do. So it's 112 miles over every Lake District pass, which is just close to 12,000 foot of climbing.
And you went over the worst too.
88 miles you hit Hard Knot, and then Rhinos, and then Bleer Tarn at the end. So
I've only driven up Rhinos, and it was like driving up a wall. So I don't know how you got up there, but well done.
Well, on my feet is the truth. Pushing a bike.
You still did it.
Yeah.
It's just better than relying on an engine. So for the benefit of our listeners, John, I wonder if you'd tell us all about your role of being CEO of Hospice Isle of Man. But before that, how all about where you came from, where you grew up, and the sort of experiences along the way to bring you to today.
Thank you. Grew up in just a regular family. My dad worked for Midland Bank and then HSBC, and that led us to move I think probably 6 times when I was younger, certainly before I was 16. And now I look back, I think that was a really healthy thing, because you don't fear getting a job on the Isle of Man and coming to the Isle of Man or moving to the northeast or wherever. But it was when I was studying sports science at Newcastle Polytechnic between 1983 and 1986 that I kind of stumbled into volunteering for a charity that worked in outdoor education with children from what they called the priority areas of Newcastle, and just discovered this complete love of being in the hills, kayaking on rivers, even, caving in North Yorkshire and so on. And what struck me particularly from the start was it was lovely seeing those children and young adults in the outdoors, but what was more prominent for me was this personal development journey that took them on, having to live and negotiate with each other at all times of the day and night, having to make decisions in the outdoors, working as a team, that kind of social development side. And so for me, it was lovely that we could kayak a river in Northumberland or sleep on a hillside in a hayloft, but it was actually how that was impacting on the future of those young people and their ability to be good social citizens. So I did that as a volunteer when I was at college, and then ironically the people who were running this tiny charity in Newcastle, they wanted to move on, and back in those days, 1986, you got a tap on the shoulder and do you want to pick the charity up and run it? So I stumbled into the world of the voluntary sector with no regrets now at all, and I think was good at fundraising because I spent that time in the summer holidays and in the weekends and so on with those young people, seeing that journey, so I could articulate that in bids to trusts and foundations and corporates, and money came in and we grew the organisation and pursued that. So I worked in outdoor education for 17 years in different charities in the northeast.
Yeah.
Just nod when I should stop.
Not at all. No, you carry on.
And towards the end of that, I had a year where we went travelling for a year. But in 1999, I raised some money from the National Lottery, which led to posting a job ad in the Guardian newspaper, and I bought the Guardian to make sure it had been posted correctly.
Yes.
And there, next to my job ad, with National Lottery funding, was a job ad for Chief Executive of the Isle of Man Children's Centre. And because I guess moving wasn't a big deal and I'd been doing what I'd been doing for 10 years, I thought, that looks like an attractive job, and found myself moving over in the year 2000.
Yes, and I remember you from back then. So you came over then, and you were with the Children's Centre
15 years.
Yeah, and accomplished many things. What particular stories have you got from back then?
Well, the board of trustees, who were and are a wonderful group of people, they wanted to see the charity become a national model for the Isle of Man, not just a Douglas model. And so growing the residential provision, having an outdoor education project seemed very natural, certainly from my background, and formalising the relationship with government and the Department of Health and Social Care at the time. So we were competitively tendering for residential care, family centres, fostering and adoption, and the charity pretty much organically grew to be a fairly major force. At the time, I suppose at its peak in 2013, 2014, it was turning over 7.2 million and had 220 staff. So,
it was the biggest thing out there at the time. I remember seeing you at the Excellence Awards, I think year after year, almost as though this charity was, it was the biggest one there, I think, by a long chalk.
In terms of perhaps staff or financial turnover, but there are so many other measures in regards of impact, and I say that respectfully to all the charities that do amazing job in all the things they do. So for me, size is not necessarily the one denominating factor.
From outside perception, it was it's the only charity pretty much you heard of for a while.
And I think in other reflections, and it's very pertinent now for the voluntary sector and indeed for the hospice, the place that takes you to is on the Isle of Man. What is a sustainable model for a voluntary sector organisation?
Yes.
How is that funded? Where is your majority reliance? So at the Children's Centre at that time, we drew a lot of money through government contracts and partnerships, and that to me, that balance of where your funding comes from definitely has to be respected in terms of the I suppose what is it the saying around you pay the piper sort of thing, and so that I don't think that'll ever go away from the voluntary sector. That thinking about where your funding is coming from and how that impacts your independence and your ability to make decisions is pretty vital.
Yeah, no, let's hope that's the case. Yeah. Okay, so you did the Children's Centre for till 2015, and I think in that time you did an MBA. Is that right? Yeah.
So the board were really kind, and I did a distance learning through Strathclyde University. Did an MBA. Would pop over every couple of months on their intense learning weekends, as they called them. So yeah, managed to achieve that qualification, but my specific interest actually was in leadership and leadership development, and the Strathclyde one, they had teamed up with a charity called the Leadership Trust Foundation in Herefordshire, so much of the study was around leadership and leadership development, leadership theory and practice, and again, to this day I'm really pleased that was the MBA that I chose.
Yeah, have you been able to use a lot of the learning outcomes in what you do?
Constantly. I think you never are fully fledged, if you like, as a leader. It's a daily learning experience.
Yeah. We're all a work in progress.
Yeah. So some stuff you get right and some stuff you get wrong. But I think the biggest thing is taking time out to kind of look back and reflect and draw out the learning, and then endeavour to apply that learning. And I do think it's an easy topic to talk about, but it's a quite hard discipline to embed for yourself and for your organisation.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. And so, when you left Children's Centre in 2015, what did you do then?
So, probably 2013, early 2014, I was thinking, well, I've been here for some time now, and Margaret Simpson was running Hospice Isle of Man, and she used to say to me, whenever I said, I think I should move on and do something else, she'd say, you'd be good running a hospice. And one day she rang me and she said, Hospice on the Isle of Wight are looking for a new chief exec, and they want somebody who understands an island community, and they want somebody who's prepared to go and live on the Isle of Wight. And again, that didn't faze me. So I started going through that process, which little did I know at the beginning, but it was quite a lengthy process, and there were all these, can you meet the recruiters? Can you meet some of the trustees? Can you meet the whole board of trustees? So it was dragging on. And in the meantime, because I had this tailor-made application to a hospice, I sent it off to another couple of hospices, and one of them said, well, if you come down next week, we're running interviews. And I was offered the job as chief exec of a hospice in Leicester called Loros, Loros, and that covers Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, so a big population, 1.1 million people, and it's the only bedded hospice for that whole population, so 31 beds for 1.1 million people.
Good grief.
Yeah, so
how does that compare over here?
Well, in my little world, really, it's really interesting. So Hospice Isle of Man has 11 beds for circa, 82,000 or 80,000 people.
Yeah.
So I've done the calculation of one bed for every 7,272 people, whereas Hospice in Leicestershire, it was one bed for every 35,000 people. So again, I will labour that the Isle of Man has got this amazing facility, with a great provision for the size of the community. I'd keep saying it's a world-class facility.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's good to hear. So you stayed there till 2022, and then you went to Percy. I've been stalking you on LinkedIn. Percy Headley Foundation. What was that all about?
So I'd been to Newcastle Poly for my sports degree back between 83 and 86, and again after being at Loros through the entire pandemic period, and as the pandemic faded away, I guess I got those kind of restless feet feeling, and was talking to a recruiter who said, I got the ideal job for you up in the northeast. Well, in fact, she said, I've got the ideal job for you. The trouble is, it's in the northeast. and I said, well, I love the northeast.
She hadn't read your resume up to there.
Yeah. And so I went for the interview and got the job. A difficult sort of period of time, because fairly quickly it became apparent that my, if you like, values and behaviours were very different to the agenda of the Board of Trustees. It was a big charity, 1,000 staff, £32 million turnover, and there was definitely a difference between seeking, in a really hard-nosed way, funding from local authorities for profoundly disabled children to be looked after and educated, and it being about the bottom line and profit. And actually, my agenda, which was the quality of care, was perhaps not as I would have wanted it to be. It's a fact, there was a school in special measures and a children's home had been closed. So we had a difference in opinion that I wanted to develop and invest in the care provision, and they were keener on brand and other
so
things.
Had this sort of predated the pandemic, do you think? Or, well, I don't think the pandemic didn't help anything, did it? But the problems.
Well, I do think, and with respect to them, it's a really, really tough sector to be in, because you've got a big staff team like that, and carers are not well-paid individuals, so you would have a very fluid staff team. And for profoundly disabled children, clearly there's a cost to accommodation and education and so forth. So it was a tough environment to be in. But and I would say this for all the charities I've worked, including the hospice, that staff are your most valuable commodity, so you have to look after them and invest in them and be respectful of them. And there was not quite that agenda in that organisation, so we parted company after 5 months.
No, right. Fair enough. So you moved on from Percy Headley. What did you do then?
Well, during my time as chief exec of Loris, I joined a group, it's called Vistage, and it's now owned by, I think, American venture capitalists, but it's basically in each region there is a club of around about 16 members. I think there are about 72 of them across the UK. So I was in this Vistage group in Leicester, and found it massively beneficial. So 16 people all who ran organisations, and actually I was the kind of minnow in the group. There were people running 80, 100, 150 million pound organisations. And every month when you meet, there's a guest speaker. And because of my enthusiasm around leadership, I said to the people higher up in Vistage, I'd like to be on your guest speaker list, and you go through a kind of selection process.
Nothing like putting yourself under pressure.
So you have to kind of go and perform, and then they say, yeah, we like you, and or no, we don't. And so I got on their speaker list, which actually I have to say, between Percy Headley and coming to the Isle of Man was very useful, because you would get booked to go and speak in all parts of the UK about your favourite subject, and they would pay you for it. So, it was a win-win, really.
Yeah, superb. So how did the job in hospice come up?
So my wife and I had never sold the house in Ramsey that we bought, and Alex, our daughter, was born in. And so when we were in Leicester, that was rented out, and we'd done various things, holiday letting and sort of full-time letting. And so we were coming back to part company with a tenant, and so we had an empty house in Ramsey. I clearly had parted company with Percy Headley, and the job was that weekend. The job became advertised for the chief exec of the hospice. So there was this kind of serendipity.
Yeah, that was the one I was thinking. Yeah.
And so it was a friend who said, wouldn't you think that'd be a good job to apply for? And so I put my hat in the ring, and really thrilled that I got the job. I mean, I would say, I think at the time, because you could say, there was some sort of preordained route, but I think they had 21 or more people apply, and it suddenly became a very competitive process, actually. So I kind of had to sit up and sharpen my pencil quite a lot.
Well, congratulations. I mean, it's 18 months in almost.
That's right, yeah. January 23 till now. Yeah.
Yeah. And how's the journey been?
Lovely. I mean, for me anyway, it's been a really fulfilling period of time, and I'm clearly a long way to go from here yet. But the main challenges were to steady the finances of the organisation, and that remains an ongoing challenge going back to sustainability, to ensure that the staff team were properly recognised and valued, and that's been a real pleasure to work with all those people and the volunteers, 450 volunteers as well. And then to set out both an operational plan for last year, 2023, but that led to a strategic plan for the coming 3 years. And that marries up actually just by chance with one of my favourite leadership models around vision, passion and action. And, I think what the hospice kind of lacked a little bit of was vision of where we're going to be in the next few years. And then, well, there was no lack of passion, let me assure you, but the action to get on and do it and the commitment. So I would say,
if you don't know where you're going, you can do whatever action you want, don't you?
Yeah, well,
it's
absolutely.
like the red arrows, isn't it?
Yeah, no, you're right, and that's how that model is. After a woman called Sue Stockdale, who's a Scottish consultant, and she said in the 10 most successful businesses she reviewed, they had equal measures or very similar measures of vision, passion and action. But interestingly, if any one of those three is missing, lots of vision and lots of passion, but you never get on with it. But the one about vision is, lots of action and lots of passion, but in no preset direction at all.
So what is the vision?
For hospice, well, the 2023 vision was to get all the services back open again. So we've gone from having 4, maybe 5 beds open for end-of-life care to now having all 11 beds open for end-of-life care, which, I find, super proud of and very thrilled that we're now back to offering that to the Manx community, and that includes end-of-life care, pain management, symptom control, respite care as well.
Yeah, excellent.
We reopened the day unit for day patients to come in with some support from the Manx Lottery Trust, and that's now furthered with support from the Hemmings Foundation. So again, having those people being able to come in for a day where they have some great social activities, they can see a nurse or a doctor, they have a lovely meal from the kitchen, and how important that is, and respite for their loved ones at home who can then get out and do stuff. So that's been really thrilling. Looking ahead, the vision really is to make sure that we can sustain all of that into the future. I think in the current financial climate, and with an organisation that now requires 6.8 million a year to run as it stands, that it would be perhaps cavalier to say we're going to have another 3 beds, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. I think providing the excellent level of care in a way that's consistent for the Isle of Man is important. To slightly contradict myself, when you look ahead to what's going on with the population, so an ageing population, an ambition to grow the population of the Isle of Man, people living longer with more complex conditions, we are pretty sure that an initiative like Hospice at Home, and people's preferred place of death to be dying at home, means that element of the charity is most likely the area we have to invest in.
So you do there's the 11 beds, and there's you've just said about the population about to.
Yeah, so with the growth in population. So the other services that are important, as important as the inpatient unit beds, would be the clinical nurse specialist team, who are often, the expert nurses who would go and visit somebody at home and decide on the pathway that their journey is going to take them. Will they, do they want to stay at home and die at home? Can they come into hospice? Do they need to go to the hospital? So a CNS, as we would call them, is a senior qualified person making really skillful judgments in coordination and, clearly with the patient and the family who have the most important say in it.
Yeah, sure.
And then there's the hospice at home team who, if the person has said, I would like to remain at home, the hospice and at home team will go in and make sure that is the case. And they're 24/7, 365.
And how many kind of patients can they support at any one time?
It's a tough question because the acuity, the kind of demand. So we had somebody recently where the hospice at home nurses were in that one house throughout the whole of the night, and clearly other phone calls will come in, and that becomes tricky to manage other phone calls. Yeah. But they would have a pretty significant caseload, probably 30 to 50 at any one time that they would be looking after.
They sound like superhuman people, like everybody involved in the caregiving at hospice.
They are, because they will drive to a house at 3 a.m. and be bright and optimistic and caring and considered in how they are. And I'm very privileged. I mean, the feedback I get about them is 99.5% wonderful.
Yeah, very special people.
Yeah. So inpatient unit beds, clinical nurse specialists helping map the journey, hospice at home. And then within the hospice, of course, all the other services, the complementary therapy team, the bereavement support team, the chaplaincy team. And all of that is underpinned by wonderful food from the kitchens and the cleanest environment you would ever see, a great HR function, a great finance function, and everything that makes up a kind of multidisciplinary organisation. Yeah. One point I would want to make for people listening, because a number of people say to me now, wow, 6.8 million, I can remember the hospice when it cost 4 million. We've very carefully, and this was part of last year's mission, mapped out that it's 111 full-time equivalents that it takes to run the hospice safely and efficiently. Of that 111, 83% of them are clinical-facing staff. So, it's about care delivery. And then the other staff are the fundraising, the marketeers, the finance and the HR.
Which, of course, you have to support the 83%.
Yeah. So we're very content, if you like, that we don't, we're not carrying huge management costs. We're not got huge back office costs. And so every pound that we are donated, we know that 81 pence of that pound reaches the patient or the family. And again, in the world of voluntary sector, that's a pretty good ratio.
Thanks for all that.
Thank you.
That's great. So if you don't mind me asking, and I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody to make you squirm a bit. This isn't my day job, as you know. I'm a financial planner. So in my day job, I ask people about their relationship with money. And I'm interested to know what your, especially having had a dad in banking, what's your earliest memory of money, and how has that sort of shaped your behaviour with it over the years, would you say?
One brief funny story about my dad, who's still with us at 90, nearly 94 in June, is I remember, because my sister's an accountant, my brother has been a senior guy in the kind of building construction industry. And I remember Dad saying to me when we were all together one weekend, what have you been doing? I said, I was with a group of young offenders caving in Yorkshire. And he looked really quizzically, he said, when are you going to get a proper job? Because in his world, it was, being an accountant or being this or that. And so, he still, to this day, can't quite get his head around the voluntary sector. And so you give up your weekend for free. You don't charge for that sort of thing. I think probably... Well, I remember going off to do my sports science degree at Newcastle and being quite high on the family agenda that you had a weekend job to earn money to, have the nice things that you might have wanted as a student. So I worked in a furniture store in the middle of Newcastle trying to sell 3-piece suites and beds.
Sorry, are you the eldest, the youngest, or the middle?
The youngest.
The youngest, okay.
Yeah. So, and I was a terrible... furniture salesperson. I didn't like the whole selling thing, but I mean maybe that's a bizarre memory, but I remember it coming back about the need to get out and earn money to have certain things that you wanted in life. And then I remember growing up as well. God, this is not particularly interesting, but when 10 pence, so I used to go sailing on a Friday night in West Kirby on the Wirral Peninsula on the Marine Lake. And when you came away from the dinghy, my dad had given us 10 pence. And for 10 pence, you could get a can of Coke and a bag of crisps. So the can of Coke was 7 pence and a bag of crisps was 3 pence. And how valuable 10 pence was.
Yeah, I got 3 bags of chips, but hey, 3 bags of crisps. Yeah. Excellent. Oh, that's a good memory. So, I could ask you what... to define what rich or wealthy means to you. What do those 2 words mean in your head?
I think there's the convenient, is it like cliched answer about quality of life and so on and so forth. But for me, I would split it. I do think having enough money to enjoy, being who you are with your family, whether that's going on cycling trips or getting away.
With gears that work properly.
Yeah. So that I wouldn't for a minute deny that I don't value and enjoy having a job that pays that I can afford to do all those things. But I think increasingly, having turned 60 in January, for me, those experiences are the things that you remember most. And so definitely at home now with my wife, we talk about doing things that you won't forget. So we're not inclined to say, shall we buy another 36-inch TV or a better music
72
system
now, John.
Yeah. So we'd rather go to a concert or have a long weekend away somewhere.
Yeah, more experiential type things. Yeah.
That's
a good answer.
Well, I do think again I do love reading, and I read a book a few years ago called Stuffication, which is an American author, and the opening of the book is somebody going down stairs in the morning, and they go into a big cardboard box, and they get out a pair of socks, and they get out the toothbrush, and so on, and it's this kind of metaphor that people. Apparently, there is a movement of people who live with either 60 or 100 things, and that's all they possess. And it doesn't mean they're rubbish things. If they have a car, it's a good car. If they have 4 pairs of socks, it's 4 good pairs of socks. Or is that 8 because there's a pair? But that affords them to live in a smaller property and to have more money to do experiences. And that's the point of the movement, is you can have loads of stuff, but you can't afford to do other things. Or you can minimalise your stuff and do lots of things.
Fantastic. So has that made you declutter or downsize your... sock drawer?
No, it definitely makes me think a lot harder about buying stuff for the sake of having that. I want that. I've seen that. It definitely does. Again, said with a smile, it brings a tension to your relationship. The book at the end suggests that you go to your partner's wardrobe and you take away 3 or 4 garments and see if they even notice you've taken away. Yeah. So I said that to Angela, and she put me right on that idea straight away.
Good on you, Angela. Well done. So of all the things you've done throughout your life so far in business, what's given you the most fulfillment?
Wow. One single thing, or
no? You can. We can give out multiple wishes today.
Yeah. Well, I think winding back, like I say, the seeing services coming back to the pre-pandemic level at Hospice Isle of Man has been and continues to be fantastic. At Loris Hospice, being there throughout the, let's say, 2 years of the pandemic.
That must have been so tough.
Yeah, and from a leadership perspective, to me, there was another model all about grip self and grip team, grip task, that what that team needed, and again, this is, a fairly 31-bed hospice serving 1 million people, was that leadership style, which was not a natural leadership style for me, where you were convening teams meetings almost every day. And what people needed was quite adult direction of we need to go. You need to go away and do this, and tomorrow it needs to be done to keep people safe or to.
So just to clarify, Teams meaning Teams, the online platform, not a virtual conference.
Yeah, apologies.
So not in purpose, not in person.
Yeah,
not in person.
Yeah, no, you're right. Thank you. Yeah, so Teams conversations, because clearly there were only certain people allowed on the ward. There were no home visits going on at that time, or if there were, they had to be very carefully planned and made with the health and safety of it all. But from a leadership perspective, it was almost like kind of shifting to the right and being quite authoritarian, very directive, in a nice way, but being very clear on what people needed to do. And as the time went on, the feedback was that people appreciated that the nice person having a chat next to the coffee machine was not right for that scenario. So, I suppose you ask what I'd be proud of, it would be that the hospice in Leicester came out of the pandemic financially and organisationally as strong as it went in, which, was something to do.
That's some achievement.
Well, I think many hospices were the same. A friend through Visted, actually, who ran a eyewear company, a big global eyewear company, he said to me that he was creating what he called tomorrow teams in his organisation, and that was, we're all here now dealing with the pandemic, but there is a tomorrow, and we need to plan for that. What will things look afterwards?
That's brilliant.
And so we introduced tomorrow teams to Loris Hospice. And it just had this remarkable effect about thinking about income generation in a year's time, or how would patient care look like in a year's time. Yeah. And I think that was a big part of giving people some optimism, that we're not just talking about the terrible day to day, but we're talking about what could be in a year's time.
Sure.
So it was good.
Cool. I'll
stop there.
Yeah. And what would be your number one tip for any aspiring business owner, leader, organisational leader?
Well, again, so on Tuesday next week, actually, I'm doing this leadership insight session for the chamber, and the one thing for me that I always come back to, which again, I don't claim as my own, but from a chap called Peter Senge, is around the strength of your relationships and the quality of your communication. And a lot of the time, I think when things go wrong, it's because one of those two things has tripped up somewhere. And I feel strongly that you need to have very good relationships with the people you work with. And, yours and their communication needs to be honest and open and consistent. And,
You mean your business family?
yeah. And at home too.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. Yeah. It's, it's not lost on any business owner, I don't think. If you've got a successful business, then it's your team, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you could go back and give 18-year-old self who's about to go off to study sports science in the Northeast, what advice would you have given him?
For me, what's been interesting, and I think by just chance, getting into the voluntary sector in 1986, or as a volunteer, a year or so before that, and having never really left it, it's that that sector has changed where you can have a career in the charitable sector. I'm not sure before then whether that was such a recognised career structure.
Yeah.
And so I think my advice would be that it's okay to follow your heart and say, I like working in the outdoors and supporting young people on a kind of personal journey, and that actually qualifying as an accountant or a banker or whatever, somehow you're second class because you've chosen to work in a charity.
Yeah.
Well, you're not.
No, that's a lovely answer. Good. Good answer. What do you do to relax, John? I mean, clearly it's not riding a partner's pass on a bike, but, how do you keep your life in balance?
I did a sports degree. I love sport, so love fell running, or more trail running, perhaps nowadays than fell running. Cycling, bit of open water swimming, walking the dog. But I would be one of the world's worst DIY people. I can make an easy job pretty complex. So I'm more safe.
That's not relaxing, is it?
No, I'm more safe being outdoors, I think.
Yeah, I know, good. And what do you think? Well, no, actually, before that, what's your favourite trip you've ever taken?
I think...
where do you dream of going back to, put it that way?
Well, because I grew up as a little boy, very fortunately, Dad chucked us all in dinghies when we were kind of 4 or 5 years old. And I've not been, but I love the idea of kind of Pacific islands, the Solomons and Bora Bora and Tahiti and all of that. So that's a big life ambition for me. Angela and I were both 60 this year, so we do hope to have the money and the savings to go away and do that.
Nice. Got anything booked yet?
No, we'll keep talking about it and kind
of the name of my travel agent.
Squirreling away a bit of money to try and make that happen. I think I'm easily pleased. So when I think recently we rented a camper van out of Perth in Scotland, we went to the Orkneys, had an absolutely fantastic time in the Orkneys. So I don't need kind of beaches and hotels and stuff personally. And please, Angela's great because she'll just kind of dive in and go do that as well. So any form of travel, I think, but it doesn't. Well, I'm contradicting myself because I've talked about Bora Bora and then I'm talking about the Orkneys, and I'm saying it doesn't have to be exotic, but
sounds like islands.
Islands, and particularly islands that you can sail to.
And would you do sailing when you go? Did you sail in the Orkneys, for example?
No, it was Easter time and the boats were only just getting on the water. But we charter on the west coast of Scotland pretty much every year around Jura and Mull, Jura,
Islay.
Yeah, Islay, the Isles of Bute and so on.
Yeah,
with maybe odd whiskey on the way.
I wasn't going to mention that, but okay. What do you think the best things are about living in the Isle of Man? And you've come here twice, so what do you think?
A lot of things. I, again, love the outdoors, the beauty of the island. I think the safety of the Isle of Man, and whether people who've been here longer than me feel that's changed. My perception of the island, having come here, and it always tickled me, meeting people to go for a run up on the mountain, was saying to people, where are your keys? Oh, I've left them in the glove box, or they're in the door of the car, and how fantastic that.
Well, what are they going to do? Where are they going to go?
Yeah, but the trouble is then when you move back to Derby or Leicester, and then you carry on leaving your keys in the glove box when you go for a run, there's probably not good prep for that.
Probably not.
So the outdoors, the safety, and I really a friend said early on, if you go shopping, you need 20 minutes to shop and 20 minutes to chat to the people that you'll meet.
At least.
Yeah, and I do like that. It's lovely going to do's and and particularly coming back, actually, I felt flattered how many people said, oh, it's nice to see you back on the Isle of Man. It feels like a true community.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Okay, and what would you say the main challenges are? I mean, in your role particularly, one of many charities, as I said, there's something like 600 charities on the register, which is an insane number for the size of the population of the Isle of Man. We're all either exceedingly generous, or it's sort of spread a mile wide and an inch deep. So
the main challenge is the sustainability of this world-class facility that the island will need in the future as the makeup of the community changes. And I think also a bit of myth busting. So one challenge, and colleagues who are running charities may feel the same, but if you're asked by a very generous company to go and have a picture taken with them, giving you £5,000 or £10,000, you clearly have to say yes, and it's lovely that the staff have raised that money. But what happens is every week in the paper, there's a picture of somebody from Hospice receiving another cheque for £5,000 or £10,000, and the perception is they're getting all the money, or that charity must be very wealthy. But last year we had an enormously generous donation of £1 million from a gentleman But when you face the truth that that's 2 months of the payroll, it kind of puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
And so Hospice Isle of Man, is not a rich charity. We have to work really hard to bring in the money just to stand still. Hence my comments about having no massive growth.
You still have to have a decent capital reserve in order to make sure you can meet all your
absolutely
your debts if nothing comes in.
Yeah. So I think the challenge is around a sustainable model. Sorry, Sharon, because I don't want to run over your time, but I think the changing world now of the voluntary sector is you will have voluntary income. You may have things like legacies and wills, but increasingly I believe there's got to be a commercial element to a charity. So you may have noticed we recently, with the support of Flutter, bought a bespoke coffee vehicle, and that coffee vehicle will go out to events and will sell coffee and buns and so on and so forth, but all the profit from that will go back into palliative care. Now, the coffee van alone will not solve our financial challenges, but I think the courageousness and the careful planning and that kind of risk profiling of what commercial activities can charities get into is going to change significantly in the coming 5 years.
Yeah, and I suppose it's actually you've got to be careful about the balance between that and competing against the private sector, or because it is, isn't it? It's like competing, like charities compete against sometimes government departments and things. It's a difficult one.
Yeah, and hospices, certainly in the UK, and to be clear, there's no suggestion we're doing this on the Isle of Man, but in the UK, some hospices have set up funeral services. And clearly, until the day they set the service up, there were a whole scutch of funeral companies supporting the hospice, and then suddenly they set up privately doing them themselves. So I totally agree. You've got to be careful about who you're upsetting and which sectors you're stepping into. But the truth is, an organisation like Hospice Isle of Man, we have a catering team, we have a domestic team, and they're very, very good at their jobs. So do you look to exploit where you have talent already rather than venturing into new areas?
Yeah, I don't know the answers to that. No. Okay, thanks. So solutions. I mean, the coffee van, obviously, opportunities for the Isle of Man, and the voluntary sector. What can you see? It seems to me like you guys are a bit of a beacon of light in terms of how you run things. Is that the framework? Is that something that we can be proud of in the regulation around charities here? I don't know.
I think looking ahead, the process through which new charities are registered could do with I wouldn't say greater scrutiny about the purpose that somebody might come and say.
No, of course not.
But it would be more, well, there are already 4 of those charities operating in that kind of subsection on the island. Why don't you go and speak to them and join forces with them? Because you said 600 before. I mean, somebody recently said to me it's past 800 now, charities on the Isle of Man. And clearly the community, as generous and phenomenally, I think unusually generous as the community is, cannot sustain more and more and more and more. So there's something about the filtering process for charities. There's also something about, and again, this is a big topic in the UK, charities with mergers and acquisitions. So the hospice I was running in Leicester did take over, would be the bluntest term, a smaller hospice out in Rutland. It wasn't a bedded unit, it was a day hospice, but they were struggling, and so Loris took them under their wing. Yeah. So I think some mergers and acquisitions, I'm really, again, you're asking about proud things, with I Listen renting pretty much an entire wing of hospice. That to me is a really, really lovely marriage, that we take rental income, they have a lovely setting to work in, and professionally we get along really, really well. So I think those small innovations, any one in its own right won't solve the problem, but by the time you've achieved 10 or 15, you start to make an impact.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Well, we're all a work in progress, like I said, so good. What have you got planned next? What's going on next for Hospice Isle of Man, and you personally? What's the next challenge?
Well, 2 weeks after the Fred, haven't really mapped out what I'd like to do next, but I will. I was saying to you before we came on air, as it were, that I keep this kind of short list of people who have mentioned they like this or that, and then eventually send out an email saying, "Do you fancy going off to do this?" I would love to get running again. You know, I'm kind of trying to shake off a poor knee, but a lot of friends that I have are still doing some really lovely trail races in Wales and Scotland and so on. So I'd like to get back to doing some of that. And then for Hospice, I think it is seeing that diversification of income and being sure that we sustainably respond to the change in the community, so more care in the community. We've had on Tuesday, Dr. Justine Needham joined us full time, and Dr. Ben Harris retired after 30 fantastic years working for the charity. But inevitably in that change, there becomes a change of style in terms of clinical delivery and so on. So I think our clinical presence in the community will increase. And working closely with Manx Care is important, because they will have a strategy and a sort of plan for how they see care for the community occurring. And as a major partner of theirs, you know, we would be reckless to just plough our own furrow. We need to make sure that what we're doing is in alignment with Manx Care. Yeah.
No. Good. Okay, so we're going to move on just to the last few fun questions that we ask. Any books? You said you read that one book. Anything else that you've read recently, or podcasts that you listen to regularly that you could recommend to our listeners?
Do you know, I'm not a podcast listener to. That's a terrible thing to say to you, isn't it? No. I'm reading a book at the moment, actually, which, again, now I say it out loud, doesn't sound very very exciting, but it's around how status is a very tricky thing, whereas popularity is a wonderful thing, and it's all around influence and sort of talking about how people can get things done. I'm hesitating. I'm trying to remember the name of the book while speaking at the same time, so I can't multitask. But I think it's called The Popularity Illusion, and what really appeals to me through all these little case studies and stories and the research they've done is that people who are popular and able to communicate and have relationships often get on quicker than people who have simply get status, and that I suppose you have to manage status and power very carefully, whereas popularity gets you a long way.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so you know,
you'll have to give us the actual name, and we'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. Are you a movie watcher then? Do you have any favourite movies?
Well, yeah, we kind of watch. We're quite Netflixy, I suppose, late on in the evening nowadays. Again, a little bit like my reading. It tends to be the things I most enjoy are, you know, true to life. National Geographic, sort of climbing Everest, or cycling the Fred Whitten on YouTube, or whatever it may be. You know, so to me, did it happen? Is it real? I get much more into that than a romantic love song.
You're not
story.
a Star Wars fan.
I've never seen it, and I've never seen that other one that was in New Zealand and
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I've not seen that either. So
yeah. Yeah, I think
you don't know what to do with that.
No, I'm sure you're better off for it. Yeah, I think I read The Lord of the Rings when I was supposed to be studying for my A-levels all those years ago. It didn't do my grades any good. What's your favourite quote? Have you got one?
Yeah, well, the one that jumps immediately to mind is, again, Goffey and Jones. It's being yourself more often, but with skill. So about being authentic, but thinking about how you are being authentic, if you like, that in a leadership role, how are you impacting upon the group, and how do you present in front of the group, and how do they need you to be on for that moment. But the other one I have to say I really like.
It's very insightful, actually.
Is now it's when the great scorer comes to write against your name, he writes not whether you won or lost, but how you played the game. And I that was a cricketer, but I'm going to forget his name.
Well, who knows if he made it up? He might have.
Yeah,
but
I think so. I spoke at the funeral of the guy who had run Loris's shops in Leicestershire, a guy called Jonathan Capewell, who sadly died of cancer in the hospice. And he set up the first hospice shop, and when he died, there were 28 of them making £1 million a year or thereabouts for the hospice. And Jonathan was a humble, hard-working retailer, dedicated to the hospice and what the hospice did for people. And the funeral was absolutely packed.
Sure.
And that was the quote I used, that everybody would say he played a good game.
Yeah.
Respected for that.
That's lovely. So where can people go to learn more about you and hospice and the work you're doing?
Hospice would be the hospice.org.im website, yep. And there's we're having that kind of refreshed or refocused at the moment. We've kind of over time been thinking it's quite income focused, and we want it to tell more about patients and patient stories, and nice. Obviously the services that are being delivered. Yeah. Yes, we need the money, but the money is for specific reasons. So we're just kind of refocusing that. And I don't do much social media. I do LinkedIn, and that's about it.
Found
really.
You on there. Yeah. Lovely. All right. Well, we'll put those links in the show notes, and we can even put a link into your Just Giving page for Fred Whitten if it's still open.
It's open till August. I think Just Giving do give you a final date, but
excellent.
Yeah,
well, we'll find a link for that and put that in.
That's kind.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you ever so much for coming out and giving me a second chance.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening this far. I hope you found this episode to be valuable. If so, I'd like to ask you for a small favour. Would you please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review, because that's one of the best ways for others to find the series, and please send a link to the podcast to 3 friends or colleagues who know they'll find it helpful. That way we can spread the word about how great a place the Isle of Man is to live and work, and help spread some positivity. Thanks again for tuning in and being part of our great community. I'll see you next time. Island Influencers is a fortnightly podcast. Make sure you don't miss the next episode by clicking the follow button on your podcast platform. A big thanks to the producer Catherine Watts from Social Cues and editor Martin Bamford at Bear Content, and thank you for listening.